My name is Gracie Jones, and for 8 years, I believed my family had destroyed my life. I was 31 when I finally understood that they had actually given me the reason to build a new one. 8 years earlier, my father stood behind the pulpit of our church in front of hundreds of people and called me a thief, a liar, and a dangerous woman. He told everyone that I had forged documents to steal a teaching scholarship and that I should never be allowed near children. My mother sat silently, while my older sister Chloe watched me with a smile that looked almost sympathetic. Nobody defended me. Nobody asked for evidence. That afternoon, my father told me to leave the house and never come back. I had only a gray backpack, $280 in cash, and a scholarship letter that I was suddenly too afraid to believe in. I walked away without knowing that the truth would eventually come from the last person I expected. 3 days before the church humiliation, I had come home from my summer job at a small coffee shop carrying a cream-colored envelope. The letter inside told me that I had been awarded the Beacon Educator Fellowship, worth more than $16,000 a year. It would allow me to complete my master's degree in education and attend Boston College. I had worked for years to reach that point, and for the first time, I believed I had a future that did not depend on my family. My sister, Chloe, read the letter before anyone else could celebrate with me. Her expression changed when she saw the name attached to the fellowship. She asked whether I knew who James Jones was. I told her he was my father's brother, someone I barely remembered from childhood. Chloe smiled and quietly told me that my father would have something to say about it. 20 minutes later, she disappeared into my father's study and closed the door behind her. That Sunday, the church was packed, and my father walked to the pulpit carrying a folded sheet of paper. He said he was there to protect the congregation from a dangerous deception inside his own family. Then he looked directly over me and announced that his daughter had stolen a scholarship she had never earned. He claimed I was mentally unstable and used fragments from an old journal to prove his accusation. The words he read were mine, but they had been written when I was 16, grieving my grandfather and struggling with my faith. My sister had secretly copied those pages years earlier. She had apparently kept them, waiting for the moment they could be used against me. My father's voice became colder as he told the congregation that I should never be trusted around children. I sat frozen while hundreds of people listened without asking a single question. Then I stood up, walked through the side door, and never looked back. That evening, my father gave me one final warning. He told me that if I walked out of the house, I would never be welcome through any door again. My mother cried behind him, but she never told him to stop. I took the scholarship letter, my college documents, 3 photographs of my Uncle James, and the money I had saved from the coffee shop. Then I walked to the bus station with everything I owned inside one gray backpack. The journey to Boston took more than a day, and I barely knew where I would sleep when I arrived. On the bus, an elderly woman named Odessa noticed that I was trying not to cry. She gave me food, a little money, and the only advice I needed that night. She told me that I was too young to be carrying so much shame for something I had not done. I never forgot those words. Boston did not welcome me with comfort or luxury. It welcomed me with cold sidewalks, crowded buses, cheap meals, and the terrifying freedom of having nobody to answer to. The scholarship office eventually confirmed that I had been selected fairly and that the money had nothing to do with my father's accusations. They helped me find temporary housing and gave me a chance to begin my master's program. I found work at a used bookstore and slowly began building a life from nothing. My bookstore manager, Peter, became one of the first people to treat me like a human being instead of a problem. I studied during the day, worked whenever I could, and taught myself how to sleep without expecting someone to come through the door and accuse me of something. Years passed. I graduated, became a teacher, and eventually founded a nonprofit called Second Chapter Boston, to help young people who had been silenced by adults they trusted. For the first time, my past was no longer controlling my future. Then a 15-year-old student changed everything. Her name was Danielle, and she stayed after class one afternoon because she was afraid to tell anyone what was happening at home. Her mother had read her private journal and used pieces of it against her in front of their church community. As Danielle spoke, I realized she was living the same nightmare I had survived. That night, I decided I would build something for children who had no safe place to tell the truth. Second Chapter Boston grew from a small project into a real organization. I spoke publicly about silence, manipulation, and the damage caused when adults weaponize private pain. Eventually, one of my talks went viral, reaching millions of people. I wrote a book, received a publishing deal, and was invited to speak at a major event in Boston. I had finally built a life my family could no longer control. But there was one mystery I still had never solved. Why had my father hated that scholarship so much? Years earlier, I contacted my Aunt Claire, the woman connected to the fellowship. She finally told me the truth. James Jones was my father's younger brother and a beloved teacher who had spent his life helping children. Years before I left home, James had confronted the church leadership because he believed they had cruelly mistreated a teenager. My father never forgave him for speaking against the church. The brothers stopped speaking, and when James died, my father refused to attend his funeral. Claire later created the Beacon Educator Fellowship in James's memory. I had been selected independently because of my academic record and commitment to teaching. My father had not been protecting the church when he destroyed me. He had been protecting his hatred. I kept every document proving the truth in a folder and locked it away. I had enough evidence to destroy the story my family had created, but I did not want to spend the rest of my life fighting them. I chose silence because I wanted peace. Then, years later, my sister Chloe found me online. She discovered my nonprofit, my public speaking, my book deal, and the life I had built without them. Suddenly, the family that had rejected me wanted me back. The first message came from Chloe, calling me sweetheart and asking me to come home. Then my mother called. Then my grandmother. Within one day, 27 messages arrived. 24 of them repeated the same 3 words, "Come back home." But 3 messages were different. They came from a number I did not recognize. The first said, "I believe you." The second said, "I know what she's doing." The third said, "Please don't come back yet, I have something to show you." I asked who was texting me. The answer made my hands freeze. The girl said her name was Sophie, and she was 15 years old. She was Chloe's daughter, my niece, a child I had never even been allowed to meet. Sophie told me that she had been watching my videos for months. She said she believed her mother was planning something. Then she sent me a folder containing evidence that would expose a second lie. Sophie had secretly documented her mother's online lifestyle brand. She discovered that Chloe had been editing photographs to make herself and her family look perfect. But the photographs were only the beginning. Inside the folder were emails between Chloe and a talent agent discussing a major sponsorship deal. The campaign was built around a fake family reunion with me. The company believed Chloe was bringing her lost sister back into the family, creating an emotional story her followers would love. Chloe had already planned the photographs, the videos, the emotional speech, and even the moment she would hug me publicly. She did not want me back because she missed me. She wanted me back because I had become valuable. Then Sophie showed me something far worse. She had found an old message from Chloe written years earlier about my private journal. Chloe had admitted that she had saved my words for the right moment. I stared at that message for a long time. The accusation that destroyed my life had never been an accident. My sister had been planning to use my pain against me long before my father stood at that pulpit. Sophie had uncovered the proof, because she refused to become another person trapped inside the family lie. She told me she wanted to expose everything publicly. I asked whether her father knew. He did. Her father, Ryan, had divorced Chloe years earlier and had watched his daughter become increasingly uncomfortable with the perfect image her mother created online. He had also seen my story and believed me. I invited Sophie and Ryan to Boston for my upcoming speaking event. I did not know what would happen there. I only knew I would no longer run from the truth. The day of the event arrived with hundreds of people inside the hall. My sister and her husband were there too. They had brought cameras because Chloe still believed she was about to create the perfect reunion. I walked onto the stage and told the audience about a girl who had once been called a thief for receiving a scholarship. I told them about a father who had publicly called his own daughter dangerous. I never mentioned my family's names. I simply told the truth. Then I said that the same girl they tried to silence had eventually built a place for children who had been silenced by adults. The audience stood and applauded. Then Chloe walked toward the microphone. She cried, held a letter in her hands, and told everyone that she was my sister. She asked me to forgive her and come back home. The room became completely silent. I looked at her and said that forgiveness was a beautiful word, but it only meant something when the person offering it could name what they had done. Then I invited another voice to speak. I looked toward the audience and called Sophie forward. My 15-year-old niece walked onto the stage beside her father. She told everyone who she was. Then she explained the sponsorship deal, the fake reunion, and the evidence she had found. She revealed that her mother had been planning to use my pain to make money. Then she placed a small USB drive on the table. The room was stunned. Chloe walked out without saying another word. I could have exposed everything myself years earlier. I could have stood there with my folder of documents and destroyed every person who had hurt me. But I realized something that day. I did not need revenge anymore. The truth had already found its way into the room without me forcing it. Sophie had not destroyed her mother because she hated her. She had spoken because she refused to inherit the same silence that had controlled our family for generations. The audience stood again, and I looked at my niece. She had given me something far more important than revenge. She had given me proof that the cycle could finally end. After the event, Chloe's sponsorship disappeared, her online brand collapsed, and the perfect image she had spent years building was gone. My mother called once and blamed me for humiliating the family. My father sent a letter accusing me of using a child to destroy them. I never replied. For the first time, I understood that silence was not always weakness. Sometimes silence was the boundary you created after finally learning that certain people did not deserve access to you. Then my grandmother called me. She confessed something she had hidden for 8 years. She was the person who had been sending me $50 every month after I left home. 36 money orders over 3 years. She had secretly chosen me when everyone else had chosen my father's version of the truth. She told me she could not stop him, but she had never stopped believing me. That confession broke something open inside me that revenge never could. Sophie eventually moved in with her father. I flew to Illinois to see her, and she met me with a bouquet of sunflowers. She apologized for everything she had uncovered, but I told her she had nothing to apologize for. She had not broken our family. She had simply refused to continue pretending it was never broken. We started talking every week. She sent me pictures of the books she was reading and the flowers she was growing. Her father sent me pictures of the garden they built together. My grandmother came to Boston and sat beside me at Sunday dinner with the people who had become my real family. For the first time, I looked around a table and realized that family was not always about blood. Sometimes family was about who stayed when there was nothing to gain. I still have the gray backpack I carried out of my father's house. The strap broke once, and I repaired it instead of throwing it away. I keep it because it reminds me of the woman I was when I had nothing. She thought she was walking away from her family. She did not know she was walking toward herself. 8 years ago, my father told me I would never have a place in his home again. He was right. I never went back. But I eventually built a home where nobody had to earn the right to speak, where children could tell the truth without being punished for it, and where love did not require silence. The people who rejected me wanted me to come back because they finally saw my value. I chose not to return because I had already discovered something better. I had learned my value without them. If this story touched you, remember one thing. Sometimes losing the people who hurt you is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the beginning of the life they never believed you could build. And if you have ever had to walk away from people who refuse to see your worth, you are not alone. This is *** Karma, Chronicles ***, where every story has a truth waiting to be uncovered. If you want more stories about betrayal, family secrets, karma, and unexpected justice, subscribe to *** Karma Chronicles * and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Gracie's family, or would you have walked away forever? Your answer might help someone else who is facing the same decision. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming the person they can no longer control.